Welcome to the WalterFootball.com podcast. This is episode 318. We're doing our 2021 NFL free agent previews, joined once again by Jacob Camenker from NBC Sports Boston. Jacob, how are you, aside from our audio difficulties that we just had?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, we spent a good 15, 20 minutes being like, why can't we hear each other? But glad we can hear each other now. Get ready to get into the swing of this NFL offseason. I just turned 25 years old, so I'm officially a quarter of a century year old. So wow. I'm dealing with the fallout of that feeling. But yeah, so I'll be very happy to talk about something other than my age at this point.
Happy birthday. I had no idea you just turned 25, but yeah, I remember the good old days of being 25 in the mid-20s and kind of getting close to 40 myself. So I'm not looking forward to that. But yeah, so anyway, yeah, we had some audio difficulties. You could hear me. I could not hear you. I don't know what happened. I could hear music though. So it's not like I had mute on. So we both restarted our computers and now it works. So it's kind of like the technology panning out somehow, even though we didn't understand what happened. But anyway, we figured that we'd talk about some places where some key 2021 NFL free agents would go, and we would take turns nominating players and kind of discussing where these guys will end up in free agency, which starts in less than a month now. So we thought we'd start with J.J. Watt because he was just cut by the Texans. There's some controversy there, like some people are saying, they should trade him, but they wanted to do right by him, so they cut him. So where do you think J.J. Watt's going to end up?
Yeah, so there are a few places, as much as I'd love for him to land in Pittsburgh and play with his two brothers, I don't think that's going to happen because they don't have enough cap space. I'm thinking that he's either going to go to one of the Texans' division rivals as sort of a opportunity to have revenge on them, or go to the Cleveland Browns, because I think the Browns have a really good foundation on defense and they need a partner for Myles Garrett. And I think J.J. Watt would really benefit from having another person aside from him that will get a lot of attention. When Jadeveon Clowney came out and he was playing well early in his career, the two of them turned out to be a pretty dynamic duo because Clowney took away some of the attention from Watt. Garrett would obviously do the same thing. So Watt could have almost a career renaissance if he could stay healthy. So I think the Browns would probably be my top choice for them. For Watt, I could also see the Colts or Titans signing him, though. I think those two teams might get in the mix, but if Watt wants to be on a ready to win team now that's pretty well balanced on both sides and has a lot of cap space, I think the Browns are going to be the team for him.
Yeah, I've heard Browns as a rumor, so I guess they're the front runner. It's a shame that he can't play with his brother in Pittsburgh, or who knows? Maybe they can make it work somehow financially, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. You mentioned Tennessee. I like Tennessee as a lot as a fit for him because he played for Mike Vrabel. It's in the division. We see a lot of players go to their rivals in the division to kind of stick it to the former team. And Watt kind of he ended on bad terms with Bill O'Brien and. Obviously O'Brien's not there anymore, but I feel like he'd want to get some revenge. And so I think Tennessee makes the most sense. So I think one of Cleveland, Tennessee, maybe Indianapolis, I think they make the most sense for him.
Yeah, I think those are the three teams we're looking at because the AFC is kind of wide open outside of the Chiefs too. I know the Bills are on the rise, but any of those kind of next level teams with the one good offseason, they can make the leap and be a good challenger. So I'm a fan of Watt sticking in the AFC with one of those teams. Now I want to nominate the next guy because he's been getting a lot of buzz as one of the top receivers on the market. Allen Robinson. He has played so well during his career despite playing with mostly garbage quarterbacks. So I'm curious where you think he's going to end up and if he's going to end up valuing money or stable quarterbacking situation more.
Well, we saw some talk about how Allen Robinson is meeting with the Dolphins front office. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but someone is posting that in the chat, so I'll take the word for it. They must be correct. So I think that would make sense for him. The Dolphins need another receiver, so I could see Allen Robinson going there. I could see Allen Robinson going maybe to the Redskins because they need not that he would be a second receiver, but they need another receiver to go with Terry McLaurin. The Redskins have the fifth most cap space in the NFL. But I would say, my number one team is the Jets. The Jets have $68 million in cap space. This is the third most in the NFL. They're going to have one of three quarterbacks. They're going to have Deshaun Watson, Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. So, I don't know if that qualifies as a stable quarterback situation if you're talking about one of the rookies, because you don't really know how they're going to play. But there's a ton of potential there. The Jets need a receiver. It's a big market. And plus there's upside as well. And the Jets have tons of money to spend. So I would say the Jets are my favorite for Allen Robinson.
I think Washington fans are very happy that you mentioned them in the conversation for him, because they are like all in. They really want him. I could see him going there because the Washington targeted Allen Robinson last year, and I think they offered him $22 million a year, but he decided to go back to Dallas. So I could easily see them offering something similar, if not maybe a little more for Robinson. So I think they'll be in play. Robinson to the Packers is a good question from JGL Reed here, because in theory, Davante Adams and Allen Robinson on the Packers would be excellent. In practice, the Packers have less than zero cap space right now. So they're already going to have to make some changes to their roster, whether that's cutting people or renegotiating contracts. And they have some key free agents, including Lane Taylor and Corey Linsley on the offensive line, Aaron Jones at running back, who I'm assuming they'll let go, but they also have Jamal Williams, a free agent there. So they got a lot of pieces that they need to at least consider bringing back. So I don't think that they'll ultimately be in play for Robinson, as fun as it is to imagine. I'll throw one more team out there that I think could be an interesting one. The Jaguars have the most cap space in the NFL, and Allen Robinson is familiar with them because he was drafted by them, signed an extension there, and had some of the best years of his career there playing with Blake Bortles. Now, you mentioned that the Jets will have an upgraded quarterback situation no matter what. Obviously, the Jaguars will too, because if he sees Trevor Lawrence going there, he might be like, hey, this guy's the next big thing. I can get a lot of money from Jacksonville. I'm, familiar with that area. Why not take a shot on it and make 22 to whatever plus $1 million a year there, catching passes from Lawrence. And, the Jaguars could use another receiver to go with DJ Chark. I think Chark as a high-end number 2 receiver, or even a 1B to have Robinson's 1A would be terrific. And then add in Laviska Shenault in the slot and all over the offense. I think that could be a very interesting fit. If he cares about money, I think the Jaguars would be in the mix there. So just another one to keep in mind there. But there are plenty of places that he could go. I think a ton of teams are going to be interested in him.
Yeah, I mean, well, it wouldn't just be money in Jacksonville. It would be success, I feel like, because unlike his previous stint in Jacksonville, like he would have a good quarterback throwing to him. I mean, he had Blake Bortles and Blaine Gabbert. Like Trevor Lawrence is such a big upgrade. So yeah, if there's no bad blood in Jacksonville, and it's a new coaching staff, so I don't see why there would be. Why wouldn't he go back to Jacksonville? So the Jaguars had the most cap space in the NFL, so I like that fit as well. I think that's really good. The next player I wanted to nominate is someone you just mentioned, Aaron Jones. So you said you think that the Packers will move on from Aaron Jones, which I think is interesting because they have so many talented running backs. And Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are both free agents, and they're both represented by Lee Steinberg. So I think one for sure is going to go. So you think it's Aaron Jones. So I'm curious to hear where you think he's going to go.
Yeah, and the reason I think it's going to be Aaron Jones is we saw what A.J. Dillon can do last year, and I think that the reason they picked him in the second round was because they knew they were going to lose Jones or Williams, and Williams will be cheaper, I would assume. And Williams can catch passes very well and kind of pairs well with Dillon in that role. So as odd as the Dillon pick was for last season, for the future, it made sense for the Packers a little bit. So I do think that he will be gone. I could see a team like the Dolphins taking a chance on him. I know that they had Myles Gaskin and Salvin Ahmed play well last year, but if they want like a true 3-down running back to help transform that offense, take some pressure off Tua Tagovailoa, I think that you could look at Aaron Jones and say, hey, this guy doesn't have a ton of tread on the tires. He's one of the best running backs in the NFL. And I know a lot of those running back contracts go south like really early on, earlier than we expect, but Jones is still young. He's only 26. So even if you agree to a 4-year deal and make him one of the higher paid running backs in the league, I think it should pay off. So I think the Dolphins would be my top choice for him. There are plenty of teams that could use running backs across the league. I think a team like the God, why am I blanking on their name right now? I think like the Lions. I could not remember the Lions for the life of me there. If they're not confident in DeAndre Swift, they have a new regime there. They could bring him in. I personally would stick with Swift, but my only thing would be if they have health concerns there. So I think that the Dolphins are probably the best fit, though, across the board.
Yeah, I think some Lions fans might be wishing that they can't remember their team because they're going to be so bad this year. If Aaron Jones really cares about money and only money, he'll go to Detroit. Otherwise, it's going to be a bleak situation there. I'm going to now nominate the Jets again. I think the Jets they have the third most cap space in the NFL. They have nothing at running back. Like, they were running Frank Gore last year, which is just a disaster. Le'Veon Bell was the starter heading into the season. He didn't work out. They moved on from him. So they have absolutely nothing at running back. They have tons of money to spend, and they need a running back to go along with their rookie quarterback or Deshaun Watson. So I think the Jets are a great fit. The Dolphins, I agree with you. I think they're another team that could sign him. We had a comment saying the Dolphins are going to take Najee Harris at number 18. They could do that, but maybe the Dolphins like Aaron Jones a lot more, and they want to spend their first round pick on another player, maybe an offensive lineman or a pass rusher or something like that. So I wouldn't lock in Najee Harris to 18. The Dolphins could sign Aaron Jones and go elsewhere. So so I think one of those two teams makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think if the Bills had more cap space, they'd be in the mix too. JGL Reed mentioned them. The Bills currently, as it stands, have about $3 million in cap space. They could easily open up more, but they have some key offensive line free agents and some depth players they need to re-sign, including, and on defense, Matt Milano. So I think that's a little something that we'll have to keep an eye on there. But I still think that any team in the AFC East except the Patriots would make sense for him. And, the Lions, if they give up on DeAndre Swift, which I don't think they'll do, but I always new regimes make weird decisions sometimes. So you never know. And I just brought up Matt Milano. He's one of the better linebackers in the league. So where do you think he might end up? Do you think he goes back to Buffalo or goes somewhere else?
I think he could go back to Buffalo. He was so important to their defense. Like, in the middle of the year when he was missing, it just looked like a completely different defense. So I think he could go back. But if he doesn't, a couple of spots stand out to me. One would be Carolina. Now, everyone's penciling in Micah Parsons to the Panthers. But if the Panthers want to go quarterback in the first round, then they're going to miss out on Parsons. So signing Matt Milano might be a way to, address the quarterback situation and find a replacement for Luke Kuechly. So I think Carolina makes a lot of sense. I think Cleveland makes a lot of sense too. Their linebacking core, I feel like, is the weakness of their defense. Once they get Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams back, and their secondary is going to be a lot better. So their linebacking core could use some help. So I think signing Matt Milano would be a huge help in that regard. Where do you think he's going to go?
I also think the Bills are going to kind of pull out all the stops to make sure they keep him. I could see Carolina too. I like that fit. They really missed Luke Kuechly last year. We hit on that a number of times. But I'll throw one more team into the mix. I think Washington would be all over Matt Milano if he hits the free agent market, because he has experience in a Sean McDermott defense. Sean McDermott learned under Ron Rivera. The team needs linebacker help. It's the weakest unit on their otherwise strong defense. And Milano, he's a true 3-down player. He played at BC. He's a lot like Luke Kuechly. He's just kind of a little bit of a lesser version of him. So I could see Washington going after him, but I think that the Bills will do what they can to bring him back, because, as you said, he was such a big key to that defense and keeping that back seven really strong and aligned properly.
Yeah. So GJL Reed is asking, is Shaq Barrett going to be with the Bucs? Can they afford him? So I guess that's the next guy we're going to bring up. Shaq Barrett had an amazing Super Bowl, and actually the past 2 years in general. He's been amazing. So where do you think Barrett's going to go?
I would imagine the Bucs would try to bring him back at all costs. The only problem is they have some other key free agents, like, Levante David's going to be a free agent. And then all the weapons that, Tom Brady wanted, and Gronk and Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, Leonard Fournette, they're all free agents now too. So they're going to have to make some tough decisions there. If Shaq Barrett doesn't go back to the Bucs, I could see a team like the Titans, who are desperate for pass rush help, offering a big contract to him and just saying, like, hey, we really need you. We're pretty competitive in the AFC, but our defense needs a lot of work, and you can be that number one pass rusher. So I like his potential fit there. I also think the Baltimore Ravens, they always seem to need pass rush help. Yannick Ngakoue is a free agent this offseason. So if they don't retain him, Shaq Barrett would fit very nicely in that defensive scheme. There'd be almost no downgrade between those two. Like, Ngakoue is a little bit better, but Barrett, any given Sunday, he can have a huge game. And I think he would be a really good fit in that defense. And, I think that's a really good fit in my mind, at least.
Yeah, I think that the Buccaneers will retain him. They have $20 million in cap space, so they can do it. It's not like they're over the cap, and it seems like half the league is over the cap, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, they can certainly do it. Like you said, they have a lot of free agents, but they're all in right now. So I think that they can make it so they resign him and have some cap difficulties in the future. But when you have Tom Brady, who's going to be 44 next year, like you have to go all in with him. And I think that bringing back Barrett is the way to do it. Now, if they don't do it, I think Barrett could stay in Florida and go to Jacksonville. As I said before, the Jaguars have the most cap space in the NFL, and they need pass rushers like Levante David. He had 1 sack last year. They really miss Yannick Ngakoue, so I think that the Jaguars could do it. The Jets, again, they have no pass rush. So I feel like they can bring him in too. So I think those are a couple teams, but I have a feeling that he's going to stay in Tampa.
Yeah, I do too. I think they'll look at his impact in the Super Bowl and keep him around. Now, a guy who I'll be very interested to see if he stays in Tampa is Chris Godwin. What are your thoughts there? Do you think that they'll bring him back, or do you think that they might go the cheaper route, keep Antonio Brown, and draft a guy?
I think that there's a better chance that Barrett returns rather than Godwin. Godwin didn't really do anything in the Super Bowl, right? Like it was all Gronk and Mike Evans drew 2 penalties and Antonio Brown caught a touchdown. Like I feel like Chris Godwin is seen more as of a luxury rather than, a necessity like Barrett is. So I think there's a chance that he returns. Like I said, $20 million over the cap, so they can bring him back. But I think there's more of a chance that he leaves. And if he does, we talked about the Dolphins, how they're talking with Allen Robinson. Apparently, he can go there. We mentioned the Redskins. They're looking for a number 2 receiver. And I think that he makes more sense than Allen Robinson because I feel like he's going to be cheaper. So the Redskins make sense to me. The Colts, I think, are another team. They have the second most cap space in the NFL, and T.Y. Hilton's a free agent. So if they let go to Hilton, who's kind of been regressing lately, I think that the Colts could throw a ton of money in Chris Godwin's direction, make him a number 1 receiver, and then they'll have a receiving core with Chris Godwin and Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell, which will be pretty good. So we'll have to just see who their quarterback's going to be.
Yeah, I like that fit a lot. Again, we talk about this a lot, but the Colts have a really good roster outside of quarterback. They've just been, moving that around. We got a Godwin to Baltimore comment here. I could see that. They really need a true number 1 receiver, and they have the cap space to do it. But I'm just not sure what they would invest in. They have some other areas. I know we harp on their offensive line. They got to get a little bit better there. They also have to figure out what they're doing with Orlando Brown there. One team that I would be interested to see if they would throw some money Godwin's way is the Los Angeles Chargers, because Justin Herbert was phenomenal as a rookie. But they have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Hunter Henry. All 3 of those guys have been injury prone throughout their career. Henry's a free agent. And we saw last year, Williams missed some time, and, the likes of Tyron Johnson and Jalen Guyton stepped up and had some good games. But just imagine what that receiving core would be like if you had Godwin, Allen, and Mike Williams there. And then you could bring in Guyton as a deep threat, or Tyron Johnson, to spell the guys a little bit. Like, then you'd have a really good receiving core. That offense would be stellar. So I think they'll probably focus more on the defensive side of the ball and maybe on the offensive line. But, if Chris Godwin's sitting there available in a deep receiving class in free agency, I could see the Chargers targeting him and just saying like, hey, like now we got the weapons around Justin Herbert. Now we just got to hit on a lot of defensive draft picks, and we're going to be a really, really good team for a long time.
Yeah, that would be awesome. But, you mentioned Henry. He's a free agent as well, and I think he's the top free agent tight end on the market. So, he's been so injury prone, so he may not get the contract he wants. But if, where do you think he's going to go as the top tight end?
So I would love to see him go to the Patriots. The Patriots have nothing at tight end. Devin Asiasi looked decent at times as a rookie, but in reality, 2 years ago, they had a fantastic tight end room. Like when it was Rob Gronkowski was there, even in decline, he was still good. Dwayne Allen was there at one point. So they had some options. And then last year it was Asiasi, Dalton Keene, and Ryan Izzo that got, I think, a total of 16 to 18 receptions total. So regardless of who plays quarterback for this team, they need a tight end. Patriots have the fourth most cap space in the league. They're going to spend it judiciously, though. Bill Belichick isn't one to overpay guys, but I could see him looking at this tight end draft class outside of Kyle Pitts and saying, hey, like Hunter Henry's better than most of the guys we can get. Like we should get him. Like that'll shake out our tight end room better. We won't have these massive issues. Like if he gets hurt, he gets hurt. Like we'll build incentives into the contract. So I think he would be a perfect fit for New England. It's impossible to predict what they'll do each year, but I think Belichick's going to be aggressive. And while he may let others target those top receivers and settle for some more mid-tier slot type values, I think he may target like Hunter Henry while everyone else is going after those top receivers. So I like the Patriots for him.
Yeah, and it's not like the Patriots can even get Kyle Pitts unless they trade up because the Pitts will almost certainly be gone by pick 15. And trading up for a tight end doesn't seem like the smartest move. And I don't think Bill Belichick would do that in the first round. So, Hunter Henry makes a ton of sense for the Patriots. I think Cincinnati would be another fit. Cincinnati hasn't had anything in tight end since Tyler Eifert was healthy, and they could use a big upgrade there with Joe Burrow coming back from injury. I think those make sense for Hunter Henry.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very interested to see what type of contract he gets, though, because he finally stayed healthy last year. But, as we know, players can be injury prone for a long time, and it can take a while to snap out of that. Now, I'm going to continue the pass catcher craze just because I'm very interested in this one guy. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be a free agent. Are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to retain him, or are they going to roll with what they have, and is he going to look to go elsewhere?
I think he'll go elsewhere. The Steelers are just in a rough spot financially. They have the fourth least, I guess, cap space in the NFL, the $30 million over, and it's really third least because the Saints are going to have Drew Brees off the books in all likelihood. So $30 million over. Like, how do you afford Juju when you have Diante Johnson, Chase Claypool, and James Washington? You can't really pay Juju that much money. So I think Juju will be heading elsewhere. If the Jets don't get Allen Robinson, I think, for some reason, I could see Juju in a Jets uniform next year. I don't know why. I just picture him playing for the Jets. I can see the Patriots going after him. The Patriots, like you said, they have the fourth most cap space in the NFL. A team like Baltimore, we brought up someone brought up Chris Godwin going to Baltimore. Juju, if he wants to stick it to the Steelers and go to a rival, that makes a ton of sense to me. I think you'll have to accept a little less money from Baltimore than he would from the Jets. But playing with Lamar Jackson could be appealing to him, and getting revenge would be nice as well. So I think one of those teams makes sense for Juju.
Yeah, I was going to say I love the Ravens for him because he just seems to fit the mold of what they'd like. Like, Juju's athletic, but I think his better skill set is just his ability to make catches. He doesn't drop a lot of stuff. Like we saw Diante Johnson drop like 11 passes in like 4 games at one point last year. Like we started calling him bricks because he couldn't hang on to the ball in DFS. I agree. I think he has to go elsewhere. If they didn't have those top 3 receivers, I think maybe they could justify keeping him. But where they have those top 3 and some holes opening up on the offensive line and minimal cap space, I think that they're going to have to, the Steelers are going to have to move on for him. So I like the Ravens for him. I also like the Washington football team. They just have, they're a young team. I think depending on what they do at quarterback, Juju might look at that opportunity and be like, hey, I could play across from Terry McLaurin. Like, he's better when he has like talent around him. Juju, we saw his first year without Antonio Brown was a little rough because he got more attention. So I think it will be important for him to go to a team that has talent. So I could see like, the Ravens work or, Washington playing with Terry McLaurin could work. So I'm very interested to see where he lands, though, because he is somehow younger than me, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's when coaches who are younger than you start getting hired, that's when you start feeling very old. So I can tell you those days are coming. They came for me. They will come for you. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah.
All right. So you're talking about Washington. I wanted to get your opinion on Brandon Sheriff. he's when he's healthy, he's been great. But he's had trouble staying healthy. So it's kind of like Hunter Henry. Like, I wonder what sort of contract he'll get. So where do you think he'll end up? Do you think he's going to go back to Washington, or do you think he's going to go somewhere else?
I think they'll pull out all the stops to get him to stay, or at least they should, because their offensive line played surprisingly well last year, especially on the left side. Cornelius Lucas and Wes Schweitzer did a good job of holding down that left side, but they still could use upgrades there. If they lose Brandon Sheriff, then the right side of their line, which was the strength, would be significantly weakened. So I think that the Washington's going to look to keep him. I think it might cost them a lot, like may cost them 14, 15 million a year, but they have the cap space to do it. Now, if he doesn't go back, I could see a team like the Bengals, who have a massive hole on the right side of the line. They saw what happened when they didn't protect Joe Burrow last year against Washington. He actually tore his ACL. So they need to build up that line and be sure it's good for when he comes back, because otherwise they're going to be in trouble. So I could see the Bengals pulling out a lot of money to get him. I could also see the Chargers going after him. They already have Trey Turner, but they need someone at left guard because Dan Feeney's a free agent. Even if they bring him back, they may play him at center because Mike Pouncey retired. So Sheriff could get attention there. Maybe they put him at left guard. Maybe they kick Trey Turner over to left guard. But either way, they'd have two potential all-pros at guard there. And, building around young quarterbacks is never a bad thing. So I think one of those two teams could be in the mix for him. But I have a sneaking suspicion that Washington's going to make Sheriff their priority.
Yeah, I agree. Like, how do you let him go? He's so important, and they have so much cap space. So, like, there's no excuse for not retaining him. But, if he's determined to leave and they don't franchise him, then I think that, like, maybe a team like, in addition to the ones you mentioned, maybe Dallas will make a lot of sense. Like, I could see Dallas throwing everything at him, and, like, the Cowboys, their offensive line has gotten worse, and I feel like they really need to focus on it again because they've regressed since their offensive line has gotten worse. Or Baltimore, they have enough cap space to make one big signing. If it's not a receiver, I could see them trying to replace Marshall Yanda, and like not having Yanda on the offensive line has really hurt them. So getting Sheriff as a replacement would automatically make them one of the better teams in the NFL again. It would be like 2019 all over again for Lamar Jackson. So I think those teams make a lot of sense, but I feel like most teams would be interested in Sheriff just because he's so talented. But then again, the injuries are a concern for him.
Yeah, any talented offensive lineman, especially one that can, play inside and maybe a little outside. Like Sheriff has never played right tackle consistently during his career, but if a team looked at him and said, "Hey, we think we can play you and have a decent right tackle," or like at least if we were in an emergency situation, we could play you there. That also could work out. I wouldn't recommend that, but it's possible. Sticking on the offensive line, Joe Tooney's a free agent, and I don't think the Patriots are going to bring him back. Because last year it seemed like they weren't going to, and then they franchise tagged him. So I think he's going elsewhere. Where do you think that he might end up?
Oh, I'm curious. I'm curious to hear. Well, I mean, like, additionally, like, why you don't think he'll be back? Like, I assumed he'd be back, but like, so that kind of surprises me. So, with that in mind, I think that the teams I mentioned, like Dallas, Baltimore, like they'd obviously be interested in Tooney. Another team that stands out to me is Carolina. They've had some major offensive line issues. They need to fix their quarterback problems as well, but I think they're stuck with Teddy Bridgewater for one more year. So I think that Carolina makes sense. But I think that the team that I would list at the top would be Miami, just because they're in the division. They really need offensive line help, and they have more cap space than the teams I mentioned. Not the Patriots, but they have. I think they're eighth most cap space in the NFL, so 26 million. So they can afford to make a big splash with Tooney. And like I said in last week's episode, I think Tua is going to be a lot better in his second year. If the Dolphins don't trade him, obviously he'll be playing better for them next year. He just needs the protection, and Tooney would be a huge solution on the offensive line. So where do you think he's going to go? And like, do you want to explain further on why do you think he's going to leave?
Yeah, so the reason I think Tooney might leave is I think he's going to be one of, if not the highest paid guard in the NFL. And I don't know if Bill Belichick's going to want to do that because the team already has Shaq Mason under contract, paid at a pretty penny. And Mike Owenu, I have trouble pronouncing his name. They drafted him in the 6th round last year, and he turned out to be a great find. They played him at right tackle last year, but he's really he's a huge player, but he's more of a big guard than anything else. With Marcus Cannon probably coming back after opting out of last season, Cannon might play right tackle, and then you have to find a spot for Owenu. So I think that they could put him into Tooney's spot and say, hey, we're going to move on from Tooney because he's going to be more expensive. So that's the only reason I think it. Like, I would not personally get rid of Joe Tooney if I was the Patriots because they have the cap space needed to keep him, and he's very, very good. But I think they may focus their energy on re-signing David Andrews because their offensive line, they really need him at center to really succeed. So I could see Tooney moving on from them. I'll mention the Jets just because the Jets were interested in Tooney last year. I think they've upgraded their line enough, but if they look at Alex Lewis at left guard and say, hey, we have the cap space to get Joe Tooney and like really transform the left side of this unit, maybe they do it, whether that's for, Justin Fields or Zach Wilson, or if they keep Sam Darnold there. I think that could end up being a good signing for them. And Tooney would give them a ton of versatility up front. And then, all the teams you mentioned, I'll mention the Chargers again. And, maybe the San Francisco 49ers, maybe they look at him and say, hey, Trent Williams was good last year, but Joe Tooney, we can kick him to left tackle and he might be better. So, yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on Joe Tooney. Like, I think he's one of the better offensive linemen in total in the league, but I'm just not sure Bill Belichick is going to want to pay entirely for him. And if I'm wrong, I will happily be wrong about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. He is the third ranked free agent on my top 100 list. So to let him go, like you really need a good reason. But I think that makes a lot of sense. Like if they were replacing for him, then you can go cheaper and try to strengthen your team elsewhere. So I can see that. Lewis Grattan says, hit that button. I forgot to say that. Hit the like button, subscribe, share this video. That would mean a lot to us as we're trying to grow a channel. We're almost at 2,500 subscribers. So that's it's a pretty cool milestone for a channel that hasn't been around for a while. So that, as I said, Tooney was third on the list. The two guys I have ahead of him, Yannick Ngakoue, Marcus May. Let's talk about them. So your pick, whichever one you want to discuss as the player you want to bring up.
All right, let's kickstart things with Yannick Ngakoue because I'm a big fan of pass rushers. Like, I love trench play in the NFL. I think like if you have good trench play, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers showed us, and a competent quarterback, you can win a championship. So I think Ngakoue. We talked about Shaq Barrett earlier in the show. I think he's going to have the similar type of landing spots to him. I doubt that he would go back to Jacksonville after how things ended there. But I could see him re-signing with the Ravens. I could see him going to a team like the Denver Broncos if Denver moves on from Von Miller and needs a partner for Bradley Chubb playing in Vic Fangio's defense. I think Ngakoue could end up being a beast. So I think Ngakoue is going to look for a stable situation, though. He's obviously the top free agent on the market per your rankings, and I think a lot of people would share that view. So he'll be able to pick and choose to go to a contender. If he thinks Denver has enough money and is a sleeping giant, I could see him doing something like that. I could also see him going to a team like the Colts that needs pass rush help, has a ton of money, and on that defense, he would be a star as well. So I think he's going to have no shortage of options, but I like him sticking in the AFC with any of those teams that I mentioned.
Yeah, I think those make a lot of sense. The Colts, I was going to bring them up, the second most cap space in the NFL. The Jets, I hate to keep bringing up the Jets, but they have the third most cap space in the NFL, and they have so many needs. I mentioned that they haven't had an edge rusher, a good edge rusher in a very long time. So getting him would be huge. And also the other New York team, I think the Giants, like even though they don't have that much cap space, they're still under the cap, and I'm sure they can cut some players to make room. They were considering signing Jadeveon Clowney last offseason, but they didn't do it. They couldn't really pull the trigger on him, and they ended up making the right decision because Clowney had no sacks last year. So Yannick Ngakoue is better than Clowney, I feel like, as a pass rusher. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants make some room and make a big play for him because they really don't have that much of a pass rush. Like Kyler Fackrell's like solid. They have a bunch of like solid guys, but like no number one pass rusher to really help out their secondary. So I think getting someone like him would make a lot of sense for them.
Yeah, I would love it for them if they could re-sign Leonard Williams and add a guy like Yannick Ngakoue or Shaq Barrett or really just one of the bigger name pass rushers in this class that consistently gets pressure. I think that that would go a long way toward helping that defense, a defense that was on the rise at the end of the year under Joe Judge too. So I would love that fit personally.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about the other guy, Marcus May. So where do you think he's going to end up? He's obviously he just had a huge year without Jamal Adams. He became the star of that secondary. He was better than Jamal Adams last year, even though Adams was injured, granted. But when Adams played, like May was still better than him. So where do you think May is going to go?
I think the Jets are probably going to try to keep him because he played so well and they have the cap space to do it. I think if he leaves the Jets, a lot of people point at the Washington football team. They need a safety. They need a rangy center fielder type to play next to Landon Collins or Cam Curl. Collins got hurt last year and Curl came on as a strong safety and was terrific. But Ron Rivera has always kind of skimped out at the spending at safety. So I don't know if he'd be willing to pay Landon Collins a top of the market type of deal and add a guy like Marcus May. So I mentioned them because they need a safety. I don't necessarily know if they will go for him. The other team that I could see going after him, I know Cleveland has some safeties on their roster, and Grant Delpit's going to be coming back. But if they're not confident in the middle of their defense and want to add a surefire upgrade, Marcus May would qualify because he would truly give them a deep range center fielder type player that can make plays on the ball, can grab interceptions, that would really just help Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, Grant Delpit kind of pull everything together there. I could see them doing that to really help out their defense. Like if they were able to sign him and JJ Watt somehow, think about how much better that defense would be. So I think that the Browns would be one of the teams I would be looking at for May.
Yeah, that would be an awesome defense if they do all that. A couple teams I want to add to that, although I think the Jets are likely to retain him. The Jaguars, they have the most cap space in the NFL, so I could see them throwing a ton of money in May's direction. They can afford to do that. Teams seem hesitant to pay up for safeties, but if you're a team that has $77 million in cap space and you're not going to pay big bucks to a quarterback for 3 or 4 years, then you can definitely afford to bring in Marcus May. And the Jaguars need to rebuild their defense. It's just awful. They had the best defense in the NFL a few years ago, and now it's one of the worst. So bringing in May would be a huge upgrade for them. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think Carolina too. The Panthers have secondary issues, just major problems in their secondary. So signing Marcus May would fix that. They don't have as much cap space, obviously, but if they want to make a big splash and make an upgrade in their secondary, then they could do that with May.
Yeah, I like his fit a lot in Carolina because they have Trey Boston and not much else there, especially with Jeremy Chin playing linebacker. But I think if you put like Boston and Marcus May together in that secondary, opposing quarterbacks would have a really tough time targeting the middle of the field, especially with Jeremy Chin playing at linebacker. You'd create like a nightmare situation on that defense. So basically anytime you can get a defensive type upgrade for Carolina, I am all for it because I miss the Luke Kuechly Panthers defenses.
Yeah, I love the old Panthers defense, even going back further when they had Julius Peppers in 03. I think that was the first year where they were really good defensively. So yeah, I miss the Carolina days for sure when they were great on defense. So who else did you want to nominate?
Let's see. I have I'm trying to think if there's any sleepers that I like. And I guess there's one. I'm really big on receivers this year. So sticking in Carolina, I love Curtis Samuel as a gadget weapon type. He can do a lot of everything. Where do you think he's going to go? Because I'm not positive the Panthers will be able to bring him back.
I agree. The Panthers have Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. So I feel like Curtis Samuel is a luxury a piece. Plus, with Christian McCaffrey returning, he's kind of like Samuel did a lot of what McCaffrey was doing because McCaffrey was out. So he's kind of redundant. So I agree. I don't think Samuel will be back. I can see the Patriots making a play for him. It seems like yeah, you're shaking your head. Yeah. So I think that, Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick would just love having him that sort of player. We don't know who their quarterback's going to be, but I feel like they would find a way to make Curtis Samuel into this dynamic player, to use him in the slot, use him all over the field. I think that they would find ways to get really creative with him. So I love that fit.
Yeah, that was my two choices are the two teams I cover, the Patriots and Washington. Patriots, for all the reasons you've outlined, I think that they would be able to utilize him and find the ways to maximize his skill set. And I think in Washington, Scott Turner has experience with Samuel in his offense. And we saw last year how he was able to use Antonio Gibson, who's kind of another like running back wide receiver hybrid like Samuel. So if you add another Samuel type to that offense, and Samuel's more of a receiver where Gibson's more of a back, the interchangeability in that offense would be really good. And I think Samuel's probably going to sign a deal that's worth like $12.5 million a year over 4 years. So a 4-year, $50 million contract. So I think that those two teams with that amount of cap space and compared to the other receivers on the market, I think Samuel could qualify as a very productive bargain for either of them. So yeah, he's one of my favorite sleepers on the market. You know, a lot of the other upper echelon receivers are getting more attention, but I think that he could end up being one of the better signings, especially at his price range.
Yeah, for sure. So we had a question. What about Anthony Harris, the Vikings safety, who kind of took kind of regressed this past year. A year ago, he was considered one of the better safeties in the NFL. And the Vikings, they franchised him. They didn't give him a big contract, and it's a good thing they didn't because he regressed. But maybe he can bounce back. So where do you think Harris is going to go?
Yeah, I don't think he'll go back to Minnesota because they don't really have cap space because they keep giving Kirk Cousins ridiculous deals. And I still can't figure out why they're doing it. I'll mention the Browns because I mentioned the Browns as possible Marcus May candidates. Also mentioned Washington. I could see them, maybe Harris won't be as expensive as a Marcus May type, but if he regains his form for Ron Rivera in that defense, like that secondary would be an absolute like nightmare to face if they bring back Ronald Darby too. And I think those are probably the two teams that stand out in my head. I can't think of another one right now. Maybe the Ravens if they want to upgrade over Chuck Clark, who played well and is on a cheap contract. But if they were like thinking, hey, we could use some more deep help in that secondary, really strengthen a strength of theirs, maybe Harris could go there, especially if he's going to sign for a mid-tier deal, which is what I'd expect him to do if he doesn't sign another 1-year contract.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a good bargain. Maybe this is permanent, the regression, but he could definitely bounce back. And I could see him like outplaying his contract for sure. I think Houston would make sense. The Texans have just an abysmal defense all around. They could use upgrades everywhere. And if they trade Deshaun Watson, they're going to have a ton of cap space. Like right now, they're 3.3 million under. So if they trade Watson, they'll have more cap space. So they can use that room to upgrade their defense, which is just so bad against both the pass and the run. So they really need talented players. I don't think they're going to get the marquee free agents because there's such a bad stigma attached to them right now. And Harris is not one of the top tier free agents. Like he's kind of like probably a third tier free agent at this point. So I think he makes sense for Houston.
I like that fit in Houston a lot, especially the Houston hired David Cullen to coach their defense, and it's Cullen or Cully, I can't remember every time I do this. But he was with the Ravens, and the Ravens have always had good secondary play. So I could see him trying to focus on adding talent to the secondary, especially with that entire defense needs a facelift. So I could see Anthony Harris being a great fit there, especially if it's on a reasonable contract, because that'll allow them to add more talent that they, already had but decided to get rid of.
I wonder if Houston's front office knows if it's Cullen or Cully. I feel like they probably don't know, and that's given how incompetent they are. It's not a surprise. Anyway, who's the next player you wanted to nominate?
Let's see. I'm kind of like scrolling through your list of the top 100 at this point, just checking out guys that are on there. I guess I'll go with another running back. Chris Carson has been productive for a long time, but the Seahawks always seem to be trying to replace him. Do you think he goes back to Seattle, or do you think he goes somewhere else?
They love Chris Carson for some reason, even though they spend like first round picks on running backs. It doesn't really make sense to me. I love John Schneider. I think he's done a great job overall. But for some reason, they just keep bringing back Chris Carson. And I think they're going to bring back Chris Carson again. But if they don't, I think that if the Jets miss out on Aaron Jones, I think the Jets make sense. Or maybe I think what ultimately happens with Chris Carson is that he's probably going to be a free agent for a while, just because he's not great. He's just like a solid guy. And then when a running back goes down in training camp, I think that team is going to sign him. So it's kind of like a wishy-washy answer, sort of. But yeah, I think that's what's ultimately going to happen with Carson. Like, he's going to find a home in July and August, and then he'll be like a solid like 4th round fantasy pick.
Yeah, I could absolutely see that. I think I love Carson as a player. I just think that, he's just rock solid. He does everything you need him to do. But where Seattle just constantly drafts running backs, and Carson was a 7th round pick. I think that this might be where they're like, all right, we need to focus on the offensive line, so we're going to spend up there. And then, we'll see what happens everywhere else. I can see the Bills kind of investing in him and then still drafting an upgrade. So if they ended up with like a Travis Etienne, Chris Carson punch at running back, and then have Devin Singletary as more like a gadget type player there. And, Zack Moss, I don't think very highly of Zack Moss. I think he's just kind of okay. Maybe they move on from one of those younger guys, but I think that would drastically change their offense if they went after a guy like Carson. So I could see them doing it, especially if he comes on the cheap. Like, I think he could come like on a 1-year deal wherever he signs. Mostly incentive-based contract. Like, I think he's going to sign as if he's going to be a backup with a chance to compete for a starting job.
Yeah, I'd like that fit for him a lot. Buffalo really needs a running game, and I like, given that Kansas City's weaker to the run than the pass defensively, I feel like they need to establish the run if they want to beat the Chiefs or have a chance to beat the Chiefs. And I had that on my mind because I was just doing my 2023 NFL mock draft today that I was going to publish tomorrow, and I mocked the running back to the Bills. So spoiler alert there. So we have a couple big names left. Bud Dupree is, he's obviously like I feel like a lot of Steeler fans read the site, and I don't think he's going to be back. Like we said, the Steelers have major cap issues. They have Alex Highsmith to take it over Bud Dupree, which happened last year when Bud Dupree got injured. So where do you think Bud Dupree will end up?
Yeah, so Bud Dupree, I think where he's coming off an injury, he might be on a 1-year prove-it deal because, he's had some good years during his career, but I don't think he's been consistent. So I could see the Titans or the Ravens taking a chance on him. I think both of those teams can sell him on the opportunity to compete now. The Ravens would give him an opportunity to, play the Steelers twice a year if he wants to show them what they're missing out on. So I think that those two teams, especially where they run 3-4 defenses, that he fits just so much better in. I think that those are probably the top locations for him. And I could see, like, if Yannick Ngakoue goes back to the Ravens, they'll still have like Matt Judon as a free agent. So if they weren't bringing him back, maybe they would bring back Bud Dupree, or vice versa. If they let Ngakoue go, maybe they go in for Bud Dupree. So I think the Ravens, with any of these 3-4 rush linebacker types, you're going to have to look at them as a potential fit.
Yeah, I'd say the Ravens were my top fit. Obviously, they're a divisional rival. Again, it would be another way for an ex-Steeler to stick it to his former team. The Titans make a lot of sense to me, too. They're so hungry for pass rushers. They're $3 million over the cap right now, but they can make some space by cutting some players, and they really need to fix their pass rush, like, no matter what. So if they don't end up with J.J. Watt, I think Bud Dupree would be like a nice secondary choice for them.
Yeah, no, I definitely like him as an option there. And I think he might linger on the market longer just because of the injury stigma attached to him, even though I think he's just as talented as some of the other options we've talked about there. So I'll be interested to see what happens to him. Did you have anyone else you wanted to talk about? Finish up with some of those other top options?
Yeah, a couple guys. The top quarterback free agent, and we kind of did quarterbacks already, but to kind of like as like a small refresher, Dak Prescott is the top quarterback. So do you think Dallas will franchise him, or do you think he's going to go somewhere else?
I think he's going back to Dallas. I can't imagine them letting him go. I think Jerry Jones might franchise him like for 15 straight years before he would go anywhere else. Like, they love Dak Prescott down there, and he showed very well this offseason this season before he got injured. So I think them bringing him back makes a lot of sense. And I think doing it on the tag, even for a second straight year, would be fine, because then they could see if he's healthy and if he still plays well, as his offensive line kind of, needs to be rebuilt around him. And then if he doesn't, then you can start talking about new terms on the deal.
Yeah, I think he's going to be franchised, and I would say that if Dallas is, if for some reason they have the number 1 seed or number 2 seed, and like heading like late into the year in December, I could see Jerry Jones pulling the trigger on a big contract, or if Dak wins some games in the playoffs, I think he's going to be signed long term. Now, if they don't make the playoffs once again, I think that Dak Prescott will be heading somewhere else after the 2021 season. So we'll have to see. But I think I'm pretty confident he's going to be back next year. I really can't see him going anywhere else. So I had a couple of other guys, just like 2 more. Just because, Levante David just won the Super Bowl. He's 31 though. So time's running out for him, even though he just had a great year. And we haven't really talked about, non-pass rushing linebackers too often. So where do you think Levante David will go?
I think that they'll try to bring him back. If Mike Evans is serious about taking a pay cut to keep these guys together, I could see him going back, but I don't know if the Bucs are going to pay big money to him. And, Devin White will eventually need a contract, and he's younger, faster, more athletic, and had a great Super Bowl. So I could see David going somewhere else. I like the Washington Redskins and Carolina Panthers. Both of those teams need linebacker help, as we've hit on. I think David with Washington could be an amazing fit because they really need linebacker help, and he would give that very young team and young defense a great veteran leader. So I like his fit there a lot. I could see the Seahawks if they're like KJ Wright is done, or if they don't bring him back, maybe they would go after Levante David. I still think that they would be more likely to bring back Wright, but David would be someone on their radar if KJ Wright decided to go somewhere else for whatever reason.
That makes sense to me. I too, like you, I think that he'll be back with the Buccaneers for sure. Although I could see maybe I'd like to hear your opinion on this. Like, what if the Patriots make a play for him? Because the Patriots had so many issues at linebacker last year. They're going to get Hightower back, but still, like, linebacker was such a big weakness for them last year. So what do you think about the Patriots going after Levante David with all their cap room?
I think that would be a brilliant move for them because they really don't have any coverage linebackers or stand-up linebackers that don't rush the passer as much. So I think David would be a great fit there. Maybe, if Bill Belichick can sell him on, we're going to get a quarterback upgrade, we're going to get back to the playoffs, and you're going to be a big piece of our revamped defense, then yeah, maybe if he gets a bigger deal there, he could go do that. But what I wonder is is he going to value the guaranteed shot at winning in Tampa Bay again over money at this point where he's been paid a lot? But I could definitely see him being a good fit in New England. I'm just not sure he would be their top target or if New England would be his preferred location. But it's definitely something to watch because the fit there is good.
Yeah. All right. Last one. Actually, there's 2 guys, but we're grouping them together because we haven't discussed this position. Center. Corey Linsley and David Andrews are the top 2 centers in free agency. Obviously, Andrews with the Patriots. So I'm curious to hear where you think Andrews is going to go, and also Linsley. We could put him in as well.
I think Andrews ends up back with the Patriots. Again, I think they let Joe Tooney go for the compensatory picks, but I think Andrews' value on the open market is less than that of Tooney. So I think Belichick will say, we'll re-sign Tooney, we'll play Owenu at left guard, and we'll have Marcus Cannon back at right tackle, and our line's going to be in good shape. And then I think that Linsley, I would like to think that the Packers would bring him back because he was terrific last year, and he was consistent. He missed a couple of games, but aside from that, I think he was spectacular, and he has a good rapport with Aaron Rodgers. So I don't think that they should get rid of him. If either of these teams moved on from either of these centers, I would probably tell them that that's a terrible idea. But the Bengals would be interested in these guys, I'm sure. And then the Rams don't have any cap space at all right now. But maybe if they could somehow finagle some cap space for themselves, maybe they would go after one of these guys just to upgrade their offensive line, because I don't think that their center spot's any great shakes at this point. I can't remember if Brian Allen's their center right now. He's fine, but either of these guys would be an upgrade over there. And I could see them just going all out to build around Matthew Stafford. And it is Brian Allen and Austin Bleither. They're 2 centers, and Bleith's a free agent.
Yeah, if they could afford him, that would be great. It's just like it's tough because they're 26 million over. But if they can make room for him, then I think they should definitely sign him. So the Packers, I feel like, are less likely to bring back Linsley than the Patriots are to bring back Andrews. Obviously, the Patriots have more cap space. The Packers are 19 million over. So if they can't re-sign Linsley or franchise him, if they don't want to franchise him, I could see the Chargers making a play for one of the top two centers because Mike Pouncey just retired, and Pouncey couldn't stay healthy anyway. And the Chargers really need to upgrade the offensive line to get the most out of Justin Herbert. So I think the Chargers will be making a play for one of the top two centers. And center is such an important position. I feel like we needed to touch on it. Like, it doesn't really get much acclaim from the media. Like, no one ever talks about centers, but I think outside of quarterback, I think you can argue that it's the most important position on the field, offensively at least. So yeah, and again, like Andrew's asking Allen Robinson to the Packers. We talked about Robinson earlier. The Packers, they don't have any cap space, so they really have to clear up some room to pay big bucks to a receiver when they already have a number one. I think it's more likely that they draft a receiver rather than make a big play for Allen Robinson or Chris Godwin.
I would agree with that. I like your Chargers fit for the centers too. And if anyone needs to know how important center is, just this story from the Super Bowl, like Ryan Jensen, when Tom Brady came to Tampa Bay, he basically adjusted. Like, he used to wear gloves on his hands for snaps, and Brady told him he didn't like it, so Jensen did it. And he also like started stuffing his pants with towels so he wouldn't sweat on Brady and get his hands wet. Like, you can read more about this at NBCSportsBoston.com in our tracking Tampa Bay section. But yeah, Jensen made some serious changes and really coordinated that offensive line to perfection with Brady. So that QB center relationship is very important. So I'm glad we did hit on the centers because as much as everyone likes tackles, centers may be more important than them because of their communication responsibilities.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading about Jensen stuffing towels in his pants. Sounds very intriguing. Speaking of writing, we had a question here. What happened to Len Pasquarelli, which is it intrigued me because I remember him. He used to be a prominent writer for ESPN. I have no idea. You could probably Google it to find out. But I remember Len Pasquarelli yelling at someone because someone called Todd Pinkston overrated. And Len Pasquarelli was allegedly friends with Pinkston's agent, and he was upset by it. And that was the last time I heard of Len Pasquarelli. This is like 20 years ago. Actually, probably like 15 years ago, which is like ancient history now. Most people don't even know who that is, so we can just move on. Kenny Gallaudet is being brought up here. I guess we can probably talk about him. Is he even a free agent? I don't think he is. Is he?
Let's find out. I thought he was, but let's officially check on that. He is a free agent. He was drafted in 2017. So Gallaudet, I could see him being like, I don't know if he's going to be in that top tier of receivers because of his injury history. I think he might be a tier below. So this would be a guy I think that the Patriots would be in on. Maybe, I was about to say the Chargers is an option, but they already have Mike Williams, who is basically Kenny Gallaudet, just in a Chargers uniform. So I think the Patriots on Gallaudet would make a lot of sense to me. That's about all I got on them.
Yeah, I the Patriots make a lot of sense as well. We talk about the Redskins, maybe finding a number 2 receiver, and Kenny Gallaudet has been serving as the number 1 in Detroit, but I don't think he's like I like him, but he's not like a pure number 1. He's like a bordering on a number 1, number 2. So I think that makes the most sense. I'm trying to figure out why I didn't have Kenny Gallaudet as a free agent in my rankings, and SpotTrack says that he's a free agent in 2021. So I'm kind of confused by that. But I don't know. I'd have to get some clarity because if you go to his page, his 2020 is in red. So I don't even know what that means. There's no like designation. So he's either free agent or he's not. So I have no idea.
I'm on ourlads.com and they have him listed as a free agent along with literally every non-Quintez Cephas Detroit Lion receiver, which is stunning. So they have one receiver under contract. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's it's weird. They really need help. So I could see the Lions going after a receiver in the first round if they don't like one of the top guys, because they're not going to get. I don't think they're going to get Justin Fields or Zach Wilson where they draft right now. So they'd have to like Trey Lance. If they don't like Trey Lance, and I wouldn't blame them if they don't. So they can probably take a receiver and then go after a quarterback in the 2022 NFL draft, which I have them doing on the site. So you can check out the 2022 NFL mock draft on the site. I have that up. Like I said, we're going to have 2023 up. So I guess that's about it, unless there's anything else you wanted to mention, or if not, do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, I think we've covered a good chunk of the free agents. So you can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Camenker. I've been doing work for NBC Sports Boston in recent weeks. Rigo's Rag, I've been running for the Washington football team for the last, I think, 5 or 6 years at this point. I can't remember how long exactly. You'll also catch me a little bit. I think I'm going to be helping out on NBC Sports Northwest this for a couple days upcoming soon. So you may see some Seahawks content with my name on it. But yeah, just follow me on Twitter to follow my work, and I'll tweet out my occasional thoughts about the NFL right there. So just keep following me, and let's enjoy this off season.
Awesome. That's cool that you'll be covering the Seahawks as well. So that's awesome. I'm at walterfootball.com. We have 2021 NFL mock draft updated today. As I mentioned, we're going to have a 2023 update tomorrow. So definitely looking forward to kind of like finishing that. I was kind of working on that earlier in the day. And then later in the week, we're going to start having like 2020 regrades, 2016 regrades, like the 5-year thing. So look for that as well. Otherwise, hit the like buttons, hit subscribe, comment below. All that would be appreciated. But I will. Otherwise, I will talk to you next week.
All right. Sounds good. Talk to you then.
All right. Bye.